The moment my sister drove away, I stood there in the middle of a gas station parking lot in Sudbury, Ontario, and I think I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I genuinely could not believe that this was my life. It was -14 degrees. My jacket was in her car. I had $43 in my wallet and no phone charger. And my battery was at 6%. And somewhere behind me, I could hear the wind picking up off Lake Ramsey, like it does in February in northern Ontario. That particular kind of cold that doesn't ask permission before it finds you. I had one thought: how did I get here? I'd always known. I just kept pretending I didn't. My name is Fiona. I'm 31 years old, and I grew up in a small town outside of Sudbury. There were 4 of us: my parents, my older sister, and me. On paper, we were a normal family. My dad worked in mining operations. My mom did bookkeeping for a few local businesses out of our kitchen. My sister, who is 4 years older than me, was always the one who got things right. Right grades, right friends, right choices. And then there was me. The one who asked too many questions, who cried at the wrong moments, who my sister used to call the family project, like I was something that needed to be fixed. I'm telling you this because you need to understand. What happened in that parking lot in February didn't come out of nowhere. It was the end of something that had been building my entire life. I just wasn't ready to see it until I was standing alone in the dark with 6% battery and no jacket, watching her taillights disappear onto the Trans-Canada. Let me back up. Our mother had a hip replacement surgery in January. Nothing too serious, she came through it fine, but it meant she was home recovering for 6 weeks, and my sister and I had agreed, at Christmas, that we would take turns driving up from Toronto to help. My sister lives in Mississauga. I live in Hamilton. The plan was that she'd go up in January, I'd go up in February, and we'd overlap for 1 weekend in the middle so we could both be there together, give our parents a break, get groceries, clean the house, that kind of thing. I should have known something was off when my sister, her name is Renee, texted me 3 days before the trip and said casually, the way she says everything that's actually not casual at all, bring cash, the ATMs up there are charging ridiculous fees these days. I said okay. I withdrew $200 from my account. I packed a bag. I drove 7 hours north on a Thursday evening after work. When I got to my parents' house, Renee was already there. She'd arrived that morning, she'd made dinner, which I thought was nice of her. She seemed fine, normal. We ate together, watched a show with my mom, helped my dad with some things around the house. It felt almost like it used to feel when we were younger, before everything got complicated. On Friday, Renee suggested we drive into Sudbury together to pick up some things my mother needed, a prescription, some groceries, a new heating pad. I said sure. We told our parents we'd be back by 4. In the car, she was in a good mood. She had music on. Her music, which I don't love, but I didn't say anything. She was talking about her kids, her husband, a renovation they were doing to their basement. I was listening, asking questions, doing the thing I always do. Making sure she felt heard, making sure she didn't feel like I was competing with her story. We got the prescription. We got the groceries. We stopped at a hardware store for my dad. And then Renee pulled into the parking lot of a Canadian Tire gas station just off the highway and said she needed to fill up before the drive back. I got out to stretch my legs. It was cold, but the sun was still up, and I walked around to the other side of the car just to move my body after sitting for so long. And then I heard the car door close. I turned around. She was in the driver's seat. The car was running. I thought she was just getting warm. I knocked on the window and she looked at me, and she smiled. I know that smile. I've known it my whole life. It's the one she gets when she's done something she finds very, very funny. She rolled the window down 2 inches. You'll be fine, she said. It's not that far. Figure it out. And then she drove away. I stood there for probably 30 seconds before I fully processed it. The groceries, including my mother's prescription, were in her car. My coat was in her car. My overnight bag was in her car. My phone charger was in her car. 6% battery. I called her. It rang twice and went to voicemail. I texted her, Renee, what the hell are you doing? She sent back a single laughing face. Then, relax. It's like a social experiment. See how fast you can get home. I'll tell mom you had to leave early, lol. I want to tell you that I was angry. I was. But the thing I remember most clearly from that moment isn't the anger. It's how unsurprised I was. That's the part that actually broke something in me that evening. Not what she did. The fact that some part of me had always been waiting for something like this. The gas station attendant, a young guy maybe 19, saw me standing there and asked if I was okay. I told him what happened. He let me use the store phone to call my father. My dad picked up on the second ring. I told him where I was. There was a long pause on the line, and I could hear my mother in the background asking what was going on. Rennie said you left early, my dad said slowly. I didn't leave, I said. She left me. Another pause. I'm sure she's just joking around, he said. You know how she gets. I do know how she gets. That's the problem. My dad said he'd try to reach Renee, and that if she wasn't on her way back, he'd figure something out. He's 71 with a bad knee and a wife recovering from surgery, and no business driving in February after dark. I told him not to worry. I told him I'd figure it out. I had $43 and a phone at 6%. I asked the gas station attendant if there was a Tim Hortons or somewhere nearby I could sit for a while. He pointed me toward a plaza about a 10-minute walk down the road. I thanked him. He said, good luck the way you say it when you really mean it. The walk was cold in a way I can't fully describe to someone who hasn't experienced Northern Ontario in February. It's not just the temperature, it's the wind, the emptiness, the way the highway sounds different up there, like something moving toward you that you can't see. I had on a thick sweater but no hat, no gloves, no coat. By the time I got to the Tim Hortons, my ears were burning. I sat down with a medium coffee, $3.50 from my $43, and I plugged my phone into a charging station near the window, the kind Tim Hortons has had in some locations for years, and I just sat there. I want to say I was making a plan. Mostly I was staring at the condensation on the window. A woman at the table next to me, probably mid-60s, gray hair pulled back, reading a paperback, glanced over. I must have looked exactly as bad as I felt. You all right, hon? She said. I told her the short version. She put her book down. Her name was Audrey, and she had one of those faces that makes you feel, immediately, that she has seen a great many difficult things in her life, and come out the other side of all of them. She didn't say what kind of sister does that. She didn't say I'm sure she didn't mean it. She just said, okay, what do you need right now? And something about that question, the directness of it, the absence of judgment, made me start crying in the middle of a Tim Hortons in Sudbury, at 4:30 in the afternoon on a Friday in February. Audrey ordered me a sandwich. She wouldn't take no for an answer. She said she was waiting for her husband to finish at the optometrist next door and she had time. We talked for almost an hour. She told me she had a daughter in Victoria, and a son she hadn't spoken to in 3 years. She said carefully, sometimes the people who are supposed to be family are the last people who actually act like it. She didn't push. She didn't tell me what to do. She just sat with me. Her husband came in, a quiet man in a Leafs toque, who she introduced as Barry, and without her saying anything specific to him, he looked at me and then looked at her and seemed to understand. He sat down too. When I told them I needed to get back to Toronto eventually, Barry pulled out his phone and looked something up. He said there was a bus, a Northland coach, leaving Sudbury at 8:15 that evening, arriving in Toronto at around 2 in the morning. A ticket was $67. I had $40 left after the coffee. Barry paid for my ticket. I tried to refuse and he waved his hand like I was being ridiculous. He said, we're going that direction anyway for part of it. We'll follow you to the station. They walked me to the bus station. Audrey hugged me at the door like I was someone she'd known for years, and pressed a $20 bill into my hand for the vending machine on the bus, and wouldn't hear a word about it. I sat on that bus for 5.5 hours with my forehead against the cold window, and watched Northern Ontario turn into the Muskokas, and then into the edge of the GTA. And I thought about everything. I thought about the Christmas when I was 12, and Renee told everyone at dinner that I'd kissed a boy at school, who she knew I had a crush on, and everyone laughed. And I cried and was told I needed to toughen up. I thought about the time she told my university roommate, as a joke at a family dinner, about the anxiety disorder I'd spent 2 years managing in private. I thought about every group chat where she'd made me the punchline, every vacation where she'd found a way to remind me quietly that I was the difficult one, the sensitive one, the one who made things complicated. $43. No jacket. February in Northern Ontario. See how fast you can get home. I got home at 2:40 in the morning. I walked in the door of my apartment, turned on the light, and stood in my kitchen for a long time. My phone had been charging on the bus. I had 47 messages. My mom had called 4 times. My dad had called twice. 3 of my cousins had texted. Renee had apparently told the family group chat her version of the story before I'd even gotten on the bus. Her version involved me overreacting to a harmless joke and storming off. She included a shrugging emoji. There were 2 messages from Renee herself. The first one, your second one, sent at midnight. Mom is upset. Can you just call her and tell her you're okay? Not, I'm sorry. Not, I went too far. Not, I should not have done that. Can you call Mom? I put my phone face down on the counter and had a shower, and I stood under the hot water until I stopped shaking. The next morning I called my mother. She'd been worried sick and I hated that. I told her I was fine, I was home, I'd had some help getting back. She asked what happened and I told her quietly, the plain version. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "She does have a funny sense of humor, Fee." I think that was the moment I understood, really understood, that I wasn't going to get what I needed from these people. Not my sister, not my mother, not the extended family members who'd seen Renee's version of events and sent her laughing face reactions. I said, "I know, Mom. I love you. I'll talk to you soon." And then I hung up. I didn't call Renee back. I didn't respond to the messages. I removed myself from the family group chat. The one with the cousins, the aunts, the holiday planning threads, and the birthday shoutouts, and the long chain of people who had spent 31 years watching Renee make me the punchline and calling it just her personality. She texted once more. 2 days later, "You're being insane. Get over yourself." I didn't respond. "I want to be honest with you about something, because I think it matters." The weeks after that were not triumphant. I didn't walk away feeling powerful. I felt sad. I felt the particular grief of understanding, clearly and without any remaining hope, that the family dynamic I'd grown up in was not going to change, and that I had spent 31 years waiting for it to. That is not a quick feeling to move through. I cried a lot. I called a friend who had been through something similar with her own family, and I let her sit on the phone with me while I ugly cried on my couch with a bowl of soup. But something else happened too. Something small at first and then bigger. I started sleeping better. I know how that sounds, but I hadn't realized how much of my mental energy had been going, for years, toward managing Renee, anticipating her moods, softening my own reactions, editing what I said and how I said it so she wouldn't have ammunition, replaying conversations afterward to figure out what I'd done wrong. When that constant background noise went quiet, I didn't know what to do with myself at first. And then slowly, I started to figure out. I started going to therapy. I'd done it briefly in university but dropped it when I moved cities. My therapist, who I now see every 2 weeks, said something in our third session that I haven't stopped thinking about. She said, "The people who leave us in parking lots, literal or figurative, usually started leaving us long before that. The parking lot is just where we finally feel the cold." I thought about February, about the wind off Lake Ramsey, about the Tim Hortons window. She was right. My mother called on my birthday in April, I answered. We talked for 20 minutes and it was okay. Stiff but okay. She didn't mention Renee. I didn't either. I think we both understood, without saying it, that there were limits now. I loved my mother. I would always love her. But I was no longer willing to absorb the consequences of her refusal to acknowledge what her other daughter had spent 30 years doing. My dad texted me a photo on my birthday of the two of us when I was about 7, standing in front of the car we used to take on road trips, both of us grinning. He wrote, "Thinking of you today, Fee. Proud of you." I saved that photo. I cried about it in a good way. I have not spoken to Renee since February. People sometimes ask if I think I ever will. I don't know. What I know is that for the first time in my adult life, I am not waiting for her to change. I am not planning what I'll say at Christmas to avoid a scene. I am not rehearsing how to laugh off the things she says at dinner that's disguised as a joke, but is actually something else entirely. Last month, I drove up to Sudbury to see my parents for a weekend, without Renee, for the first time in years. My mom and I cooked together. My dad and I watched a game. On Sunday morning, I drove past the Tim Hortons on my way out of town, and I thought about Audrey and Barry, who I never got a last name for, who paid for a bus ticket and a sandwich and $20 for the vending machine and asked nothing in return. I pulled into the parking lot and sat there for a minute. I thought, some strangers gave me more care in one evening than my sister had in 31 years. And then I thought, that's not a tragedy. That's information. I drove south on the Trans-Canada. The sky was enormous and pale blue the way it gets in early spring up north, and the trees were starting to come back, and I had a full tank of gas and my coat on and both hands on the wheel. I had my whole life ahead of me, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like exactly enough.